What is going on, everybody? Welcome into the top 10 of my power rankings and deep dive series with the reveal of the number 10 Pittsburgh Steelers. Before we hop in, please do hit that like button down below. Really helps support my channel, helps this video get more views. And for those of you listening through the podcast format, I do appreciate you. Also, please consider leaving a review on the podcast. We will be resuming regular shows once this series is done. So this Pittsburgh Steelers team coming in the top 10 now. Really serious expectations after they surprised a lot of people, if not everyone, last year with how good this defense was. But now, can the offense, getting Big Ben back, become at least an average unit? Because last year, while they won a lot of games with their defense, there's no way around it. This offense was miserable with the combination of Mason Rudolph and Devlin Hodges. So a lot of this hefty expectations for this team are going to be centered around, can Big Ben come back and help this team put up some points to complement this really good defense. So we're gonna do that. We're gonna go through the roster. We're gonna talk about each position group, offense through the defense, rank each group, how they stack up against the rest of the league. While we do that, you will be looking at my own custom Madden rosters. So while it is a video game, I realize that they are my own ratings, and it's a nice copyright-free graphic that I can use to show you how I perceive each player. Then we're going to talk about this team's schedule, their Vegas over-under, and my win total expectations for this team. So let's get into it, starting with that also important quarterback position with Big Ben here. They're going to rank 12th in the league, and I will say that's probably about as high as it will go. I think that's giving Big Ben a bit of the benefit of the doubt, given the scope of his career, that he can come back and, be a 12 to 16 quarterback. I do think the arm strength is going to fall off a little bit. But, man, they've done a great job, in my opinion, to really surround him with weapons that can complement an older Big Ben. And we'll talk about those guys. But I fully expect Big Ben to come out and, have that general feel about him, to have the leadership and execute an offense. He's going to need playmakers to step up around him. He's going to need offensive line in front of him. He's going to need good play calling. But that's most quarterbacks in the NFL. And I really think Big Ben, while he might not open up and be an MVP type of quarterback and have this explosive passing game, I really think he's going to be efficient in his own way, particularly in an effective short to intermediate passing game. So I really do think he's going to be healthy. Now, he's been banged up throughout his career. As far as bouncing back from the injuries he had last year, I think he'll be fine. The question is, does he get hurt again? Very much possible. But I do expect him to enter the season healthy and play as a league average starter. I do rank him 12th. He's very close to these sort of Kirk Cousins type of quarterbacks, Jared Goff, in that light of a quality starter. And that's kind of my expectations for Big Ben. And ultimately, it's going to give this team a higher ceiling than they had with Mason Rudolph and Devlin Hodges, just because they're going to know what they're going to get from that quarterback position. Now, if anything were to happen, I think we'd see a very similar style of team that we had last year, which was trying to basically milk the clock, run the ball, get rid of the ball quickly with Mason Rudolph or Devlin Hodges. Whoever ends up winning, I would expect it to be Devlin Hodges. I don't even know if Mason Rudolph makes this team. And then rely on this defense. But, hopefully that doesn't happen, because you're probably removing Super Bowl hopes if Big Ben does go down. They do also have Paxton Lynch on this roster, a former first-round pick for the Denver Broncos with a lot of physical talent, but just mentally doesn't have it between the ears. So the quarterback room going to rank 12th. I think it's going to be a massive upgrade from what this team was dealing with last season. Then we've got the running back group. They have a lot of bodies here, but I really don't feel like spending a lot of time on this group because I'm not all that excited about it. I think they'll get the job done. But as far as sort of that fear factor, I just don't think it's really there, and they're going to rank 22nd. So I do like James Conner, but he's he's a good, powerful, do-it-all, jack-of-all-trades, master of none type of back. He is in the final year of his contract, could be looking to really prove it. He's got that badass mentality. This is the year for him if he's going to come out and earn any sort of significant career earnings. This is the year he's going to do it. Otherwise, he might just fall by the wayside. So, he could come out in beast mode and be like a Paxton Lynch type of power back. I think he has that in him. But that is a rarity in today's NFL. We're seeing a lot more of these power backs coming off the field for faster running backs on passing downs, which nowadays are second and third down. So it's not that James Conner can't catch the ball to the backfield. In fact, his hands are pretty spectacular. It's just the explosiveness out of the backfield. And that's a big reason I think this team has spent a decent amount of draft capital in sort of these more scat back types. You have Anthony Mcfarland. They bring in Kareth White from Chicago. I think Jalen Samuels was kind of the same idea last year who they drafted. They have a plethora of these guys. Now, I think White and Samuels can certainly play that role, but the guy I'd be excited about is Anthony Mcfarland, a guy that was really underutilized at Maryland. I had him as a top 10 back in this class. He, in my opinion, kind of fell to the fourth round. He's a guy that is extremely explosive. Reminds me a lot of sort of Aaron Jones, Dalvin Cook out of the backfield. And I think he's going to bring an element of catch and run explosiveness to this offense that they're really looking for. And they had another draft pick that we'll talk about soon that really plays well into this idea that they're going to make things easier on Big Ben, give him some good run after catch receivers. And I think Anthony Mcfarland has some real potential to get up there as far as workload. I don't think he'll take the starting job from James Conner because Conner just does a lot of good, hefty work between the tackles, and Mcfarland just didn't do that at Maryland. I don't think he's ready to do it as a rookie, but I really liked that pick, and I think he's going to bring some nice things out of the backfield. And then they pick up Wendell Smallwood. I don't see him making the team, and they have Benny Snell, a fourth-round pick last year, so it's a very deep group. But I think they have potential to exceed 22nd with guys like Conner and Anthony Mcfarland. But I don't think it's a spectacular running group by any stretch of the imagination. And then you also got to mention Derek Watt, who they bring in, who's going to be a good blocking fullback for this team. So let's move on and talk about some of these other receiving threats here. As I mentioned, a really good combination of guys here that I think are going to play nicely with Big Ben at his age. What is he, 38 years old? We've seen that arm talent seem to drop off on a year-to-year basis, and I think the Steelers are anticipating that to continue. I don't think we're talking about Tom Brady, who pretty much looks the same at 43 as he did at 34. I think Big Ben is going to see some age regression as we continue to move forward. He's just had so many injuries, it's going to pile up. So surrounding him with a lot of really good short to intermediate passing targets here. So we talked about Anthony Mcfarland, who does factor in here. I think he will help out in the passing game. But more importantly, you obviously have Juju Smith-Schuster, who's going to be more of your traditional outside threat here, your red zone guy, your jump ball guy on a tough third and long. He is an outstanding catch in traffic receiver. His run after the catch is also really nice, which plays into all of those things we talked about with Big Ben. That's going to be nice. I don't think Juju is going to truly have an explosive vertical receiving season. I think he's a good vertical receiver. He's not the fastest guy in the league. I wouldn't say he has the cleanest release off the line of scrimmage. He's capable as a deep threat, but I wouldn't say that's necessarily his strength. I do think over the middle of the field, the toughness, the ability to shrug off a corner and get some tough run after catch and to make those really tough contested catches, that's really what you're talking about with Juju as your sort of technically number one receiver here. But you have some really interesting pieces behind him. By the way, the ranking here is 18th, so it's a very capable receiving group, although not spectacular. And you're counting on some of these young guys to really step up. And I'm looking at Deontay Johnson, third-round pick last year, James Washington, a second-round pick in 2018, and Chase Claypool, a second-round pick last year. So all guys that have received high-level investments from this Steelers team. And this team does get a bit of the benefit of the doubt as far as these guys developing, because the Steelers have kind of been the golden example of how to draft and develop wide receivers. So you have some confidence in that. And these guys all have very different skill sets. So the guy I would say with the highest ceiling here to me is going to be Deontay Johnson. I loved him coming out. That was one of my better draft calls in 2019, was mocking this team to draft Deontay Johnson with this pick in the 3rd round that they traded Antonio Brown for. And you know, I loosely compared him to Antonio Brown as a small school guy coming out of Toledo with very similar physical skill sets as Antonio Brown, as far as the foot speed, the release, the catch after the run after catch. He's even very similar in size. So I like Deontay Johnson, and he started to show some flashes last season. He's certainly a guy pegged for a lot of people as far as a breakout season, and I really think Big Ben is going to see him with a lot of familiarity as far as playing like Antonio Brown, and it's going to help him develop. I don't think he'll ever be the receiver that Brown was. Brown just had that rare catch and traffic ability, the ability to track the ball as a deep threat, that I don't know if Deontay Johnson's ever going to have that. But if you want to talk about what Brown did in the short to intermediate passing game as far as getting open early and having good run after catch, I think he can do similar things that Antonio Brown did, and I think he's going to play great in this offense. So I really like what you have there. He's just got to kind of come out and prove it. And then I want to talk about Chase Claypool next, because I think he's got a lot of room to thrive in this offense, more so than James Washington, who I also like. But James Washington, I think his biggest strength is a vertical threat. And if this offense is going to focus on short to intermediate passing games, creating quick mismatch problems and emphasizing run after catch ability, I'm looking at Chase Claypool as a guy that's going to really have a chance to thrive in that offense. I wasn't particularly high on Chase Claypool. I had a 4th round grade on him, but he came out and ran a 4.42, I believe, at the combine, weighing in at 235 pounds. Was physically compared to Calvin Johnson. Now, Claypool's not going to be an outside wide receiver. He just was never good at that at Notre Dame. He spent 4 years there and basically didn't show much development at all. Now, he didn't have great quarterback play, but what is fascinating to me about Chase Claypool is if a team, a smart team, say the Pittsburgh Steelers, could draft him and turn him into not a full tight end, but in a lot of ways like Evan Ingram, who in my opinion should have been Chase Claypool's physical comparison all along, not Calvin Johnson. I think if you can line him up as sort of the second slot on trips looks and really use him towards the line of scrimmage, where he's going to see a lot of matchups against linebackers and safeties, as opposed to corners who are just way quicker. And honestly, I don't think Chase Claypool's play speed is 4.4 fast. But I do think he's fast enough that with that size, he can really win some easy matchups against outside linebackers and box safeties and be a really nice mismatch problem for this team, and technically be their 3rd starter on 11 personnel. So I am very intrigued by the upside of Chase Claypool, and all of those 3 skill sets we just described fit perfectly with how I envision this offense. So while there's a bit of unprovenness to these receivers with Johnson and Claypool, I think the upside is pretty spectacular here, especially if Big Ben can be healthy. And then you do have James Washington, who's an outstanding deep threat, and he's kind of come along over the years slowly as a 2nd round pick, but as a 4th guy or a 3rd starter, if Claypool doesn't work out, I think he's very serviceable as a 4th. So you have some really special depth, and it even keeps going. You have Ryan Switzer, who's a very capable slot wide receiver if Claypool doesn't work out, who can start. You have Deon Cain, who I have no idea why Indianapolis, I don't spend a lot of time questioning their moves in Indianapolis, but I thought Deon Cain was a really talented receiver. He missed his rookie season. I think it was an ACL injury, and they basically just let him go before giving him a true chance. And I think that's your 6 at wide receiver. So I love this wide receiver group. 1 through 6, it might be the deepest in the league, which says a lot. There's just some unproven elements in there. And then the tight end group is fine. You have Vance McDonald, who at least has really developed as a blocker. He's a good run after the catch threat, which will play nicely in this offense. So I do think he'll be the starter. But then they take Eric Ebron. Now, if Chase Claypool is good as a rookie, I don't think Ebron plays much of a role here. But it's insurance to that. Very similar player, a guy that's not a particularly good blocker, but a total mismatch problem and really good after the catch, similar to Chase Claypool. So I think you'll see Ebron if Claypool doesn't really step up. I did like that signing. He didn't cost this team like anything. So I like that move a lot. Then you have Zach Gentry, a 5th-round pick last year. It's not the deepest tight end room, but it's not the worst. So they're going to rank 18th at wide receiver, and I think they have some serious potential to shatter that ranking if some of these unproven guys can step up with a healthy Big Ben. Then you have the offensive line ranking. They're going to rank 8th, which is lower than they've ranked over the years. It's still a very good offensive line. They do seem to be thinning out, I will say, because this was a pretty spectacular offensive line back in like 2016 with the Killer Bees. And they haven't, to me, done as good of a job as they historically have as far as drafting and developing offensive linemen. And I think part of that was they did let Mike Munchak go, one of the best offensive line coaches in the league. So this kind of new regime of coaching staff has a decent amount to prove as far as letting some of these guys develop. But at the same time, they haven't spent a lot of draft capital on this group over the last 2 years since they let Mike Munchak go. But anyway, you have Alejandro Villanueva at left tackle, who's a very solid left tackle. He is just a massive human. Not an elite tackle, but really good in both pass blocking and run blocking. Like, he's just a good, solid, all-around tackle. He does well to still get leverage with his frame of 6'9". Then the left guard is going to be a new starter this year, Steven Wisniewski. Ramon Foster, a long-term veteran, has retired here. Wisniewski has started many games in this league. I think he'll be fine as a weakest link, but it is a downgrade from what you had in Foster, who had a really nice season last year. Then you have Marquise Pouncey at center. He's entering his 10th year in the NFL. A very good center. I expect him to play as a top 10 or so guy. You have David DeCastro, who's still one of the best guards in the NFL. And then Matt Feiler, who really stepped up. I mean, this guy has played well over the course of his career. Was brought in 2015 as an undrafted free agent. And he's one of these guys that Mike Munchak kind of developed. And they felt very good letting Marcus Gilbert go and plugging him in at right tackle, and he beasted out for this team. So you have a very experienced offensive line here. And like I said, they're going to rank 8th. To me, you don't quite have that elite force altogether that they used to, but it's still a very good offensive line. And they're going to buy a ton of time for Big Ben. They're going to clear some lanes in the run game as well. And I think this is another... I feel like I have a negative tone surrounding this offensive line. I think it's just because it's not quite what it used to be. But, man, this is still a really good offensive line, and it's a big part of why this team ranks in the top 10 and why I think this offense can really suffice as a serviceable unit. The depth here, however, is really not that good. It's another reason I am a little questionable here, because if you have an injury here, who are you really leaning on? You have almost no depth on the inside. They draft Kevin Dotson in the 4th round. Was not on my radar. They clearly saw something they liked. This is kind of their highest investment since Munchak left. So we'll see what they get from him. Then you have Derwent Gray, a 7th round pick last year. Don't have particularly high expectations for him. The tackle depth is okay. I do kind of believe in Chukwuma Okorafor. Their lack of drafting tackles over the last few years, despite having some older guys at that position, does make me believe that they believe in him to step up. So I'm not going to question the Steelers on that one. We just haven't really seen it from him. And then they have Zach Banner, who's kind of a beast, but has plodding footwork, so I think would be a liability in pass protection. They'll bring him in for some heavy packages as a run blocker for sure. So the depth just isn't really there for me, but the starting unit should be pretty damn solid, and I think will help contribute to this offensive ranking of 14th. So I'm glad we went through the roster first, because I think you can kind of see why now. I do have some optimism that this can be a league average offense, which is a scary upgrade from last year for the rest of the NFL, because this was arguably the worst offense in the NFL last year. Off the top of my head, I can't think of a worse unit last year. So to move up 16 spots is a massive jump, and I think the expectations for this offense are very real. But they've got to put it all together. Big Ben's got to stay healthy. These receivers have to step up. Randy Fitcher has got his hands full as far as doing a good job with this offense this year. But I think they're going to get it done and have a very stable, consistent, 20 to 24 points a week, which is going to be really lethal as we get to this defense that's going to rank 5th. So inside the top 5 for this defense. As far as the coach and culture rankings, by the way, I didn't do that at the beginning. We'll do that before we hop into this defense. So overall coach and culture, I have them 12th. 6th for defense, because I think Mike Tomlin is more of a defensive mind. I do put more weight on offense. That is why they're not inside the top 10 for overall coaching and culture. But I do think Tomlin is an extraordinarily good coach. He's a very good culture CEO type. And then offensive coaching and culture, I have them 17th. Randy Fitcher to me, unproven, but I do like the continuity with a lot of veterans here and having the leadership in there from Big Ben, at least on the football side of things. So there's your coach and culture ranking. So let's go through this 5th ranked defense here, starting with the run defense that's going to rank 2nd in the league. This is simply one of the best fronts in the league. So you have Cam Hayward, who is an outstanding 3-4 defensive end, one of the best in the league. He'll kind of double as your sort of Belichickian 3-4 end, play a lot of 3-tech, 4-tech, dominant run defender, but he doubles as a really good pass rusher too. That's going to contribute to a good pass rushing grade in just a minute. But Stephon Tuitt is now basically coming back. He missed the final 10 games of last season, so that's going to do a good job to supplement the loss of Javon Hargrave here. I think that kind of balances out, at least in run defense. It could be an upgrade as far as pass rush is concerned, but really good to get him back opposite of Cam Hayward. And then you also have other guys here that I think are going to step up. You have Daniel McCullers, who's going to be a nose tackle here. Chris Wormley, they pick up from Baltimore, I think can really step up and emerge with the help around him here. They actually traded with Baltimore. Now, that's suspect. Usually you wouldn't trade interdivision if you're a smart team like Baltimore, who has got a really good eye for these guys, especially for a Michigan guy with Harbaugh there. That's suspect that Wormley can actually develop here, but maybe that trade was eye-opening for him. He's got a lot of talent. And then they have Tyson Alualu, who's a really, really good run defender. Isaiah Buggs, a 6th-round pick last year. They draft Carlos Davis in the 7th round. I think all of these guys can play. Davis maybe needs a little time. He's a really good athlete, though. So I like this interior group. I think that's your 7. And then you have a really good edge group against the run. TJ Watt and Bud Dupree, both of these guys are lights out against the run. TJ Watt has some of the craziest run defense instincts of any edge player in the league. Not the most powerful player, but his ability to kind of bend around run blocks and find the ball carrier is unique. So he helps. And then the linebackers are great here. Vince Williams and Devin Bush, no complaints there. I think Bush in year 2 could really emerge as one of the best linebackers all around in the NFL. Not a lot of depth at that linebacker group or the edge group. But then you also have a really nasty slot corner in Mike Hilton, who's going to help against the run. So basically, good luck running against this 2nd-ranked run defense that I have no question that Mike Tomlin's going to dial up again this year. And then the pass rush is going to rank 3rd. So I do think they'll repeat their performance from last year. So let's just go back through that same unit in terms of pass rush. I'll talk about TJ Watt first, whose development has been outstanding. He has really just all around every aspect of being a true pass rusher developed, as far as understanding counter moves, adding a power element to his game. get off, anticipation, just, spatial awareness. Like, he's just a do-it-all edge rusher who is, I liked him coming out, but he's even exceeded my expectations and really emerged as a defensive player of the year type of candidate, a top 5 or so edge rusher in this league who I think it's going to be tough to repeat what he did last year, but I don't think he'll be far off. What really stood out to me, other than the 81 pressures and 18 sacks, even 2 interceptions, I mean, his versatility is just ridiculous what he does. But what really stood out to me was the 8 forced fumbles. It really speaks to his instincts. So I think TJ Watt's going to continue to build up the Watt brand name and just kick ass and take names this year. He's a big reason this team ranks 3rd. But you have Cameron Hayward and Stephon Tuitt, who's going to be one of the best interior pass rushing duos in the league. And then you have Bud Dupree, who's playing on the franchise tag. I think this team did a good job to not give him a long-term deal because last year was an anomaly for his career. But as a 4th rusher, he has one specific skill set that he can really use because he's going to see single teams constantly, which he'll use to his advantage. He's got long arms, he's got good get off, and he's very powerful. He's a very good power rusher off the edge. He's got that sort of bull rush long arm that's tough for a lot of tackles. Now it's going to be a little more matchup dependent. Some lengthier, stronger tackles are going to be able to handle Bud Dupree pretty easy. But he could be a handful on the opposite side. So obviously one of the best pass rushes in the league, going to rank 3rd. The depth, however, is certainly a concern. You don't want any injuries here. I don't see really anyone on the edge or the interior that I'm particularly high on. Last year they were able to replace Tuitt with Hargrave. I don't think they have that guy this year. It would probably be Tyson Alualu coming off the bench if you do have an injury on the interior. Carlos Davis is a 7th-round pick, has some potential, but I think he's got a long way to go, especially in a year where these rookies aren't getting a lot of practice time. Same thing can be said about Alex Highsmith, who was a 3rd-round pick here. A lot of physical tools. I think this team is hoping that he can kind of learn from Bud Dupree, who is a very similar type of athletic profile with Alex Highsmith, but definitely a guy coming from a lower level of competition that I don't think is really going to come in and be an impactful pass rusher day one, and the edge depth is non-existent here. If this team could bring in a capable veteran, I think it would really help because Ola Adeniyi and Tuzar Skipper, very low expectations there. But again, the pass rush ranking 3rd, really going to help this defense. I think the front 7 here is the identity of this top ranking defense. The linebacker group ranking 14th. Potential to shatter that if Devin Bush can take the next step. He was really good as a rookie, but it's a position that just takes time, and I wouldn't consider Bush a top 10 linebacker at this moment. I think he could very well get there. Really athletic guy, unique movement skills to cover running backs out of the backfield. A little bit shorter arms. I think he over time might struggle a little more with tight ends who are going to just have that length on him. That might separate him from some of these taller linebackers as far as covering tight ends, which is just one aspect of the game. But he also has rare, just kind of route recognition, and he's one of these guys that will cover players, not grass in zone coverage, which is really important. You drop into your zone, don't stay there forever. Find someone to cover. Otherwise, good quarterbacks are going to pick you apart. Devin Bush is a guy that will find someone to cover, which is really important. And then Vince Williams is really surprised with his late career development as well. Just all around as a run defender in coverage, he's kind of stepped up since Ryan Shazier went down. The problem is there was a couple years where he was their number 1 linebacker. He's not just good enough to be a true number 1. So you potentially have that now with Devin Bush, and Vince Williams is a good complement to him. Again, though, the depth not very good. It's really just Ulysses Gilbert, a 6th-round pick last year, and that's about it. So I would say this, especially the pass rush and the linebacker groups, these guys have got to stay healthy because they just don't have a lot of depth at the moment. Then the secondary is going to rank 19th. It's a fine unit. I think they'll get the job done. You have Joe Hayden, who's continuing to play well despite his age. they've gotten a lot out of him, who was basically cut from Cleveland because they didn't think he had anything left in the tank. Just another bad Cleveland move, and interdivision Steelers have been taking advantage of that for a long time. He's not a great man-to-man corner. He's not going to cover the best athletes in the league, but just a really stable, smart corner with good ball skills, good run defender. Then you have a question mark at the other corner. They bring in Steven Nelson last year, and he was solid. I would say he's probably the weakest link of the three corners, but he's very capable as a starter. And then Mike Hilton is possibly the best. No, he's not the best, but he's probably top 5 slot corner in the league. So you don't, to me, have any superstars at the corner spot, but very capable starters, hence why they're kind of in the middle here, around 19. The depth, you have Cameron Sutton, who they were actually rotating a decent amount with Mike Hilton last year in the slot. I think he can play at least in the slot and come in on dime looks and be a decent fourth corner for them. You've also got Justin Lane here, a lengthy, high-caliber athlete out of Michigan State. Unproven, but they spent a third-round pick on him. He has some upside. You would hope he could maybe step up, but definitely a question mark. And then the depth after that is definitely nobody of note. Guys like Breon Borders, James Pierre, Tajon Brandy, just, no one you're leaning on. So they really should need to stay healthy at the top. The safety group, Minkah Fitzpatrick is an interesting conversation. It's become very clear that Steelers fans think he is a top 10 safety in the league. I would say he's a top 10 free safety if you split it free and strong. I think he's a top 20 safety overall. It's not that I don't think he'll be better than that. In fact, I think he will. He just doesn't have a lot of reps. He's only played like 13 games as a true free safety here for Pittsburgh. And if you look at what he did after the first month when he got acquired, where I actually made a video about how basically he lucked into 3 or 4 of his 5 interceptions. He was good after that, but he wasn't an elite safety. So I think he's a really good player. I think he's a future superstar. I just think people are looking at Minkah right now as the guy he's going to be in 2 years, if that makes sense. So I do like Minkah Fitzpatrick. I think he'll continue to grow. But week 1, is he an elite impact? I hate to say no, because Steelers fans are going to shred me for that. But he's a very good center fielding free safety. I see him in the same breath with guys like Eddie Jackson, Anthony Harris, Justin Simmons, Jesse Bates, Malik Hooker, Marcus Williams, in that range of, top 10 or so free safeties. And then the strong safety spot, major question mark with Terrell Edmunds. He's fine as a kind of matchup nightmare counter type who can come in and kind of match up on tight ends and running backs. But that's really all he is a good athlete. He was a total reach in the first round. Everyone knew it. He just doesn't have the route recognition. He's overly aggressive. He needs to start to show some composure and football IQ at that strong safety position that I think he's just lacking. I would say he's the weakest point on this defense. This strong safety spot as a whole is the weakness, because then you have Antoine Brooks, Marcus Allen, a couple of day 3 picks over the last few years, potentially smarter players than Terrell Edmunds, but they're just not going to play over Edmunds. So again, the secondary, not very deep. Depth is a challenge for this team, and in a year with the whole COVID situation, it could backfire on this team, but the starting defense is spectacular. Again, ranking 5th overall. So now that is out of the way, let's take a look at the schedule here. It's a nice schedule. I think they get a lot of their harder games at home this year with teams like Philly and Houston. Denver isn't easy, especially if they had to go on the road early in the season, where they seem to be pretty special out there in Denver. You get Indy at home later in the year. So I'm not going to go game by game here. You guys can take a look at it if you're listening on the podcast. I encourage you to head over to YouTube and check it out. But I've got them going 10-6 with a win range of 9-12. I think this team's going to be a really solid football team this year, and If everything can click on the offensive side of the ball and this defense can stay healthy, they are absolutely Super Bowl contenders, in my opinion. So I don't mind the over bet. I wouldn't mind if you wanted to put a little Super Bowl action on this team. I don't know what their odds are off the top of my head. I think they're like 25-1 or something, so I don't think that's out of the question. I think we're looking at a really solid, balanced football team this year with some pretty high upside if all things can go right. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Drop your comments down below. What are your expectations for this team? Was this too high or too low? Who do you think comes next? Let me know in the comments down below. Please do hit that like button if you enjoyed this video, if you enjoy the series. Cheers as always, and we'll see you for the next one. Peace out.